John Miller, a Marine veteran, stood frozen as the security guard snatched his cherished jacket and coldly ordered him out, his symbol of sacrifice dismissed like trash. The stunned crowd watched in silence, disbelief thick in the air. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. John Miller's heart sank as the heavy glass doors swung shut behind him. The hum of the hotel's plush interior faded into the night's chill, and the weight of Mike Thompson's rejection pressed down harder than any battlefield scar. This wasn't just about a jacket, John realized. It was about the unspoken walls between those who serve and the worlds they return to, often rigid, unforgiving, and unaware. Mike Thompson adjusted his cap, the corner of his mouth twitching as he watched John's retreating figure. To Mike, this was business as usual, upholding a standard, preserving an image. The hotel catered to an elite clientele who expected a certain ambiance, and Mike, once a security officer at a private club, had long learned that perception was everything. His mindset was rooted not in personal animosity, but in a strict interpretation of policy. The dress code was clear: no denim, no casual jackets. Period. For Mike, bending the rules meant opening doors to chaos, diluting the hotel's prestige. It was a black and white world where nuance was a weakness. But beneath Mike's rigid exterior was a man shaped by his own struggles. Mid-30s, recently divorced, trying to hold on to a semblance of control in a life marked by unpredictability. Enforcing rules gave him structure, a place to assert authority when other parts of his life felt fractured. Mike didn't know how to reconcile that John's jacket wasn't just fabric, but a narrative woven from years of sacrifice and hardship. Inside, the lounge's patrons exchanged glances charged with discomfort and disbelief. Sarah, a middle-aged teacher seated near the bar, clenched her fists beneath the counter, anger simmering beneath her polite expression. She had seen veterans dismissed too often, their service reduced to cliches or ignored altogether. To her, the sight of John being ushered out was a stinging betrayal of respect owed, a blatant injustice masked as policy enforcement. The lounge's atmosphere, once lively with the warmth of saxophones and murmured conversations, grew heavy with tension. Meanwhile, the bartender, Jake, polished a glass, his jaw tight. He knew John from past visits, a quiet man with a steady gaze and a subtle kindness. Jake understood the importance of that jacket, the silent testimony it bore. His eyes flicked toward Mike with an unspoken challenge. How could a rule hold more weight than a man's dignity? John's voice, low but resolute, cut through the thickening silence as he confronted Mike one last time. That jacket isn't about dress code. It's my story, my service. You can't just erase that. Mike's face tightened, caught between duty and an unexpected pang of doubt. The words hung heavy, but his training and the pressure of his role closed the door on empathy. "I'm sorry, sir. This is the hotel's policy. No exceptions." As John stepped away, the spectators' shock morphed into a collective unease. Some wanted to speak out, but hesitated, afraid of disrupting the polished order Mike was sworn to protect. Others silently vowed to make sense of this moment, to turn their discomfort into action. The unjust encounter was not just an isolated incident. It was a spark igniting a broader conversation about respect, recognition, and the true meaning of honor in civilian life. Outside, John's breath formed small clouds in the cold air as he tugged his jacket tighter around him. The sting of rejection was sharp, but beneath it lay a flicker of resolve. He wouldn't let this dismissal define him. The jacket, battered and worn, was more than fabric. It was a reminder of resilience, and John was determined to ensure that dignity and respect were never denied again, even if it meant standing alone. The digital echo of John Miller's unjust encounter reverberated with astonishing speed. Within hours, social media feeds were flooded with posts, comments, and videos chronicling the moment a decorated Marine veteran was turned away from a lounge for the simple act of wearing his service jacket. The hashtag #HonorOurVeterans surged, fueled by a collective outrage that transcended geographic and political boundaries. This was no ordinary grievance. It was a raw wound, reopened publicly and unflinchingly, exposing a societal fracture that many had long sensed but rarely confronted so starkly. The outrage was visceral and immediate. Veterans groups issued statements condemning the hotel's policy and its rigid enforcement, framing the incident as emblematic of a broader cultural failure to recognize and honor those who have served. Online commentators dissected the symbolism of John's jacket, not as mere clothing, but as a tangible badge of sacrifice and identity. Influencers and ordinary citizens alike grappled with the shame that such disrespect could occur in a country that prided itself on military valor. Yet, amid the swell of anger, there was also an undercurrent of shared pain. John Miller, isolated in his small apartment, scrolled through the flood of messages. Each notification was a reminder of the humiliation he endured, the sharp sting of invisibility, the bitter taste of rejection despite years of service and sacrifice. The jacket that once symbolized pride now carried a heavier weight, but the swelling support provided a fragile balm, an ember of hope in the suffocating darkness. Into this charged atmosphere stepped Sarah Collins, a local activist with a history of championing veterans' rights and social justice causes. Her voice, sharp and unwavering, pierced the noise. Sarah mobilized community leaders, organized rallies, and coordinated social media campaigns that humanized John's story beyond headlines. She framed the incident not as an isolated faux pas, but as a call to action against systemic disregard for veterans' dignity. Sarah's efforts galvanized a diverse coalition. Young activists, retired military personnel, business owners, and ordinary citizens, united by a shared conviction that respect for those who defend the nation was non-negotiable. As the movement grew, the story attracted the attention of state officials. Governor Rebecca Lawson, known for her pragmatic leadership and deep respect for the military community, seized the moment with calculated urgency. At a packed press conference, the governor's presence commanded silence, her voice steady and authoritative as she articulated the state's commitment to remedying the injustice. Honoring those who serve is not optional. It is a sacred duty we owe, she declared. Disrespect towards our veterans will not be tolerated in any public space within this state. John was invited to share his first-hand account. Standing before a sea of cameras and reporters, he spoke with a calm that belied the tumult within. His narrative was unembellished yet deeply moving, detailing the shock of rejection, the clash of policy versus humanity, and the profound sense of invisibility that followed. Every word underscored a universal truth. Dignity cannot be legislated by dress codes or confined by arbitrary rules. It must be lived, breathed, and upheld by society itself. Governor Lawson followed with a suite of new policies designed to safeguard veterans' rights in public venues statewide. These measures mandated sensitivity training for security personnel, established clear exemptions in dress codes to honor military attire, and created channels for veterans to report and resolve grievances without fear of dismissal. The governor framed these reforms not merely as administrative adjustments, but as a profound affirmation of the state's values. The press conference ended with a palpable sense of resolve and cautious optimism. For John Miller and countless others, this was more than a policy victory. It was a reclamation of dignity. The rising storm of injustice had met a steadfast current of hope, signaling that respect for those who sacrifice is not just rhetoric, but a living principle capable of transforming communities. The hotel's formal apology arrived swiftly, a carefully worded statement that bore the weight of genuine contrition. It acknowledged the grievous error committed against John Miller, a man whose sacrifices had earned him the country's highest regard. The management extended an invitation that transcended mere words. John was to return as an honored guest, granted VIP treatment that included a private table at the lounge, complimentary services, and a public recognition ceremony. This gesture was more than protocol. It was a public reclamation of dignity, a symbolic act affirming that John's presence was not only accepted, but celebrated. Mike Thompson, the security guard who had enforced the hotel's dress code with rigid adherence, stepped forward with a rare public admission of fault. His apology was tinged with humility and a clear sense of awakening. "I didn't understand what that jacket meant to John," he confessed, voice steady but remorseful. "I was focused on rules, not the people behind them. I promised to undergo sensitivity training and do better." His commitment to change echoed through the community, illustrating the profound impact of empathy when paired with accountability. John's experience became a catalyst, emboldening countless veterans to share their own stories of being misunderstood or marginalized. These narratives, once isolated and quiet, surged into the public discourse with newfound urgency. The dialogue transcended individual grievances, exposing systemic gaps in how society honors and integrates veterans beyond superficial ceremonies or hollow platitudes. From small towns to urban centers, veterans found their voices amplified, demanding respect that recognized the complexity of their service and the challenges faced long after the battlefield. The ripple effect reached policymakers and community leaders, many inspired by Governor Rebecca Lawson's prompt and compassionate response. Her leadership became a case study in governance that balances firmness with empathy, decisiveness with humanity. Officials across states and municipalities began reevaluating their own policies concerning veterans, drawing on the example set by Governor Lawson's administration. Sensitivity training programs were expanded, outreach initiatives launched, and advisory councils formed to ensure that veterans' concerns remained central in public discourse. John's journey from rejection to recognition crystallized a universal truth. Respect and gratitude for those who serve must never be conditional, contingent on dress codes, or confined by rigid social expectations. His resilience embodied not only personal strength, but also the collective capacity of communities to evolve. He stood not just as a man wronged, but as a living symbol of honor reclaimed and dignity restored. At the ceremony held in his honor at the very lounge where the incident began, the atmosphere was charged with solemn reverence and quiet celebration. The jazz band played softly in the background as John accepted a plaque commemorating his service and the courage it took to confront injustice. His speech, brief but heartfelt, resonated deeply. "This isn't just about me. It's about every veteran who's ever felt invisible. It's about respect, dignity, and the promise that no one who serves this country will be cast aside." The event became a touchstone, inspiring ongoing community efforts to support veterans through mentorship programs, employment initiatives, and mental health services. John's story, once a painful encounter of exclusion, evolved into a beacon of hope and transformation. His triumph reminded all who witnessed it that the true measure of a society is how it honors its heroes, not just in words, but in unwavering action and respect.